So you remember when we were first talking about multiplying and dividing by negatives? We talked about this world, this plus and minus world, right? And we said if we had an object, right? And we said, okay, that's a number, and that's not going to work. Okay, let's try that differently. Okay, so we had, we had a number here, and then we multiplied it by a negative, so then it moved it to the negative world, and then it was here. Or if we had a number here, and we multiplied it by a negative, it moved it to the positive world, and now it's there. Well, the same thing happens if we look at the number line, only we have to analyze the number line a little bit more than that. So here we're at 0, and then 1, 2, 3. But if we were to label our numbers going to the left, we would get -1, -2, -3. And so what I'm looking at is, like, if we had the number 2 and we had the number 1, the number 2 is bigger because it's farther to the right. Isn't that the rule? When something's farther to the right, it's bigger. Now, if I was to take these numbers, 2 and the 1, and multiply it by negative, I'd end up at -2, and I'd end up at -1. But then all of a sudden, things have changed. The 1 is now bigger, because in the negative world, things flip over. What used to be on the right is now on the left. What used to be on the left is now on the right, which means, because that's how we tell if things are bigger, what used to be on the left is now on the right, which means now it's bigger than what used to be bigger than it. So when we flip worlds, we change which one's bigger and which one's smaller. And that matters when we are going to do solving with inequalities. So let's say I have this problem. In order to solve for n, remember we still have this balance scale, and even though it's not technically balanced, we want to keep it the same amount of unbalance as it used to have. So we still solve it like an equation, and I want to get rid of my -2. It's being multiplied times n, so I need to divide it by -2 to get rid of the -2. And then in effect this becomes a 1, right? So now we just have n. But what happened was, over here we had the number 20. We divided by a negative, so we flipped it to the other world. And so what we did is we said, in fact, by dividing this one by -2, we flipped that one to the other world too. And by flipping to the other world, we said, hey, this changes. It is no longer, n is no longer going to be smaller, n is going to be bigger. And then, of course, we always graph these things, right? And so whenever you do a problem, you need to look at, if you multiply or divide by a negative in the process of solving, then you need to make sure that you switch the sign. Okay, for example, if we had x over, it's not writing very well, x over -2 is greater than 3. In order to solve this, I need to multiply by -2, and when you multiply by a negative, you switch the worlds. And so then these guys are 1, right? So those are gone. And so now we have x, and 3 times -2, that's -6. Because we multiplied by -2 on both sides, we switched the worlds for both of them. So now this guy has to switch, and now x is bigger. And so we get that graph. Okay, so make sure that when you multiply or divide by a negative, you switch signs. That is not true if you add or subtract, though. Right? So don't forget that if you had x plus 4 is greater than 6, and you're solving that, and so you subtract 4 from both sides, you're not flipping worlds, you're just moving pieces. And so you don't switch the sign. The sign stays the same when you subtract. So be very careful about that.